Right-wing political commentary saw a marked change in 2017 with the advent of the moniker for a collection of right-wing political commentators that don the aesthetics of independent media, the intellectual dark web, as it was dubbed by Barry Weiss and Eric Weinstein, and then in a book written by R.I.P. Michael Jamal Brooks, was a collection of pseudo-intellectuals funded by various right-wing billionaires like the Koch brothers and Fractech that eventually led to our topic for today, the enshittification of political discourse, the soy right, and the current state of right-wing populist media. With me today, I have One Hand Politics, aka Mason. You may know him from various episodes of Jubilee's Middle Ground or Surrounded. He's also on twitch.tv/onehandpolitics and on Twitter at onehandpolitics. Mason, thank you for coming in today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Super excited to talk about this decay of our social system.
It is an absolute rot, which is kind of a perfect, term to give it, because one of the most prominent people in the right-wing media ecosystem right now is known for his rot, is known for his, let's say, unwashed approach, but we can dive into the different personalities. You have a lot of experience with dialogue between, be they more established right-wing personalities and ones that are trying to get a foot in the door of the right-wing media space. What has been your assessment from off-camera, on-camera, of where the right-wing media space has kind of changed from the first early days of like 2016, 2017, Donald Trump's administration, because he had a marked change to a lot of right-wing approaches that was reminiscent of some of the more, peripheral right-wing spaces like Rush Limbaugh or Bill O'Reilly, the more, I'd say, callous and, openly reactionary perspectives. How do you see it from your, experiences?
Yeah, you mentioned a change with Donald Trump, and I think to an extent that's true. I think definitely the methodology has remained consistent. So the bait and switch of using an ever-evolving treadmill of a victim group in order to blame most of societal's problems on, that's always been something consistent with reactionary thought. But I do think that the content and the overall atmosphere of where they're trying to groom people into has definitely become more extreme. When it looks at total harm, I mean, neocons advocate for international harm on a wide-scale basis, but I think that their approach when it comes to domestic policy has always been more civilized. You think of this with Mitt Romney's or even the George W. Bush's, where their outward appearance is very much, homie, I'm a country boy, or I'm somebody who's a businessman. I'm
retail politician.
Yeah, exactly. It's the artificial nature of I'm doing this for you. And while these crazy liberals are saying that we're hurting, all of these terrorists, it's actually because we're doing it for your favor and the security. And I think now it's completely devolved into there actually is no security among your own people here, among the own population. They're actually threatening you on a day-to-day basis, whether it is trans people trying to perv on people by using the restroom, or whether it is migrants coming here from destabilized countries to make a better life for themselves. There's always a victim group that is pointed at for the cause of most societal problems. And I think that has become ever more extreme under the Donald Trump era of Republican and reactionary politics.
I think there's a bit of a ratchet effect happening where, as the cycles between Democrat and Republican leadership from the top have shifted the Overton window more to the right, the same has kind of happened with the approaches in right-wing media, where the kind of intellectual patinas that someone like Jordan Peterson or Ben Shapiro or like a Sam Harris type character have largely like referenced, academics, have tried to bring studies, but the core of it was always very dumb. It was always things that were easily disprovable or have been disproved for a long time, but they're like holding on to these ideologies or some kind of justification or misrepresentation of studies. But it seems that there's no need for that, because at the core of it has always been the veneration of the wealthy and the degradation of the poor, the villainizing of lower social groups. And while it was trying to posture it's like, oh no, we just want meritocracy. It's kind of gotten to this point where it's no, we just want a preferred in group. There's no trying to intellectualize these very important topics, but from their perspectives, it seems like even someone like Ben Shapiro has started to shift over to more pop culture react content, and you see it in their algorithms. You also see it in the soon-to-be bankruptcy of the Daily Wire. They can't keep up, and part of it might be that a lot of these right-wing media personalities have always wanted to be in entertainment anyway. Like Ben Shapiro wanted to be a screenwriter, Jordan Peterson wanted to be like a pop culture philosopher, Matt Walsh was a shock jock radio guy, and all of them, like, they wanted to be in Hollywood, but they're fascists, they can't create art, they're incapable of like making something of their own. And the accessibility of something like social media, that if you have a camera, if you have, you know, a okay quality microphone, you could just start with the lowest common denominator approach to right-wing politics, which is cruelty. Have you seen that with your experiences in the kind of spectacle of discourse? I mean, Jubilee is something that, you know, people might know you from, and I think even in Jubilee, I've started to notice a marked like degradation in their attempts to even have an aesthetic of, we're trying to drive a conversation here. It seems that they're very rapidly descending into like a more society of the spectacle approach.
Yeah, I mean, Jubilee without a doubt postures himself as the enlightened centrist, right? We're all just trying to do our best part here, and we just have different ideas on how to do it. And that mentality is really destructive, especially when you're equivocating certain positions that are fundamentally paradoxical. You can't be pro civil rights for a marginalized group, as well as trying to strip away their very existence. So those are always going to be in conflict with each other. But I think it plays to a broader point of the internet becoming more profitable. And I think it really just reflects the logic of late stage capitalism, right? You extract value as much as you can until something collapses. So the discourse isn't dying online because people are less smart or kind. It's really because platforms no longer serve people or human connection. They're serving investors and what drives ad revenue. I mean, that has become the predominant generation of wealth, is the internet now. And it's awesome for people to be able to be an independent journalist and be able to make a living doing that instead of just being a wage slave. Mm-hmm. But I do think that it's added a degradation as far as what our conversations look like. So once user bases are locked into certain places, features get worse, moderation collapses, content is optimized for ads and not really the truth. And especially with AI and content farms just flooding the internet with sludge now, it really makes meaningful connection impossible. Yeah. So I think that really plays into Jubilee's part as well. If you look at the Jubilee comments, I guarantee you these are not all real people. Oftentimes, these are partisan groups that are utilizing bots in order to reinforce a narrative. And when I'm somebody who's not political, I'm 15 or 16 years old, and I'm coming on here because I want to hear the conversation of where the country's supposed to go. And I'm seeing hundreds of comments on a Charlie Kirk video saying all these liberals are soy and have no idea what they're talking about. I'm already going into this with an opinion without even hearing the conversation.
Right.
So it is disappointing to see where this is all trending. A big reason why I continue to do it is because I think that these are power vacuums, and I think that Jubilee is going to release these videos regardless of who participates in them. And so my rationale is, okay, for somebody who is a leftist, somebody who is not in favor of what's going on, I need to represent this as some rational voice. And even if I get 200 people that watch the video to really rethink what's going on here, that is enough to where it justifies my presence on there, as opposed to somebody who goes on there and kind of just collapses under a right winger.
Yeah, there's always a consideration I've made when I've applied for Jubilee, recordings, and I've done interviews multiple times with them, and it's always been difficult because they refuse to like delineate between like, you know, lib, left, conservative, and, you know, like nationalist. They try to muddy the waters of the broad arrays of discourse and, you know, ideologies, and the reduction of that, this oversimplification of the perspectives that are varied in a society, blunts any kind of approach that they could have. And I've been very critical of them in my interviews with them, which is why I've never been on one probably, that these questions are framed never from a perspective that isn't one that's going to be inflammatory. There's no just, neutral proposition that one can, maybe find that middle ground, which is what they're, supposedly trying to find, radical empathy, what they call it. But that only serves right-wing perspectives. It only serves a perspective that is antagonistic, right? This is gladiatorial sports. And I'm glad you brought up like the algorithms, because I actually had something prepared for this. A study in 2023 out of Tech Policy Press. A new study suggests that right-wing bias in YouTube recommendation algorithm. YouTube is the most popular video platform in the world and has been described as potentially one of the most powerful radicalizing instruments of the 21st century. However, this claim has not been backed conclusively by scientific evidence, a reality further complicated by the fact that YouTube's sheer scale and opacity make it difficult to study. A new paper by researchers in Princeton University and UC Davis puts two related concerns of empirical scrutiny. The authors examine whether a user's YouTube recommendations are congenial, read compatible with their political ideology, and if these recommendations become more extreme as the user goes deeper down the YouTube rabbit hole. We kind of commonly refer to this as the alt-right pipeline in spaces like ours, and this is not unique to YouTube. I think everyone can pretty much see what Twitter has become very easily, with having a pay-for-play, pay-for-views, basically, a system in place. There was a Facebook whistleblower dossier leak about 2 years ago, I think it was in 2022, where the whistleblower basically described how there is, within the code of Facebook and all meta platforms, a dial. You turn that dial up, you get more engagement, more ad revenue, more value of the company. You turn that hate dial down, you don't get as much ad revenue. So there's an incentive built within the structure of online political content to rage bait, to clickbait, and to engage in inflammatory behavior that is poisonous to not just discourse, but the society in and of itself. And I think that's why we find whenever there are people who have an established audience find themselves in controversy, they hit that transphobia button. They hit it's so-and-so on the left's fault. Oh, it's the wokeism. Oh, everybody's becoming too PC. And we've seen that consistently over time. There are plenty of names that we could bring up, but are you noticing this as well? Because I feel like sometimes I'm a little crazy and I see someone, get banned off of a platform for a, off-color comment, and then immediately try and capitalize on that with doubling down off-platform.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's why Rumble exists, right? It's a place where people can consolidate around an echo chamber and say, look at how badly we've all been treated. It proves that the system's against us because we're speaking the truth. And so you get into an argument of, is deplatforming good, or does it do a broader harm because it creates an even more isolated chamber? I think that I've heard a lot of good takes on both sides. But for me, specifically what you're talking about, I think getting into the reasons why people will capitalize on inflammatory comments is because it does drive the clicks. It's everything that you just said. And so the prominent example that I've talked to is Michael Knowles. If you go back to Michael Knowles' career, I mean, this is a guy who never talked about LGBTQ issues. He acted in films as gay characters. He grew up in New England, which is not like this super reactionary place towards LGBTQ people. And he started to capitalize on that once he saw the success of Matt Walsh or the success of other people on the Daily Wire. I mean, he was only hired there because he had connections with one of the producers for the Daily Wire, who saw that he could speak well and he was not going to make it as a theater actor. So
yeah, he was friends with Jeremy Boring, I believe, like the co-owner of Daily Wire and Ben Key.
I think it was like his son or his uncle or something. I don't know. They were alum at the same college. And so he was like, hey, I'm not really cutting it as an actor. I want to do something that's profitable. I can speak really well. And he is a good speaker. He kind of started as just being really like skeptical on climate change. Mm-hmm. He also was like trying to introduce nationalism as like an acceptable form of economic policy. It was just really kind of this subtle right-wing push. And that's why he was always kind of like the lower end of the tier list of the Daily Wire. And then Matt Walsh just skyrocketed after the "What is a Woman" bullshit. And he kind of was just like, oh, maybe I can capitalize on this. That was when he said his famous quote at the RNC of transgenderism needs to be eradicated.
Right.
Which, again, this genocidal language is only fueling the flames of the cheerleading of the right, while also getting the reactionary posts about liberals or leftists saying, I can't believe someone would say this, how dare they, and elevating that person's career even more.
Right, it drives clicks.
Yeah, and I really think that in particular is the whole premise of Surrounded. Surrounded is guaranteed to drive clicks.
Mm-hmm.
It is the conservative saying, let's go, finally we're owning all these LGBTQ losers. And it's also getting the liberals and the leftists and the people who are fine with civil rights to say, oh my God, can you believe this person's saying this? Let me send it to my friends. Why does this have 12 million views on YouTube? It's guaranteed traffic and it's guaranteed clicks. And I think that is obviously immoral. I think it's wrong to prioritize profit over the well-being of groups that are already suffering from legislation and authoritarian rule, and kind of just building echo chambers and stigmas in groups that already hate them and are targeting them. But I don't think that I'm holding Jubilee to the standard of doing the moral thing, because at the end of the day, they're a media company. So like, what else would we expect from a media company that is only profitable from clicks? Like, again, this is just a product of late stage capitalism trying to siphon as much labor or siphon as much profit as they can from something that's continuing to decay.
I have a feeling one day I will be vindicated on my conspiracy theory. I think we're all allowed like some silly conspiracies. I think Jubilee is a Mooney operation, but maybe that can be confirmed at a later date. What you're describing though is like, go ahead.
They have like some weird religious fundamentalism backgrounds. Like if you look into the early videos, it's like very much like Christian missionary focused.
Yeah, Jason Y. Lee, I think, is the founder of Jubilee, and yeah, he's like a born again Christian.
Yeah, so it is interesting to kind of see the development or the evolution of trying to be like this nonprofit outreach org and then shifting into this for-profit media empire.
What you're talking about though was interesting, because it's something I've been trying to unpack on my streams, is that there is a permission structure that's both built within the content producer's environment, but also within the audience environment. When Michael Knowles or Matt Walsh, whoever it is, when they're moving further to the right in their rhetoric, it's deconstructing what's like a social faux pas for a lot of their audience to just be that outwardly reactionary. They're saying that there is really no like consequence in independent media. You get banned for a little while, you get demonetized, whatever it is. Like I said, that's what Rumble's for, that's what these different platforms are for. There's a lot of different revenue streams that you could have a safety net for your content output. I think Asmongold the other day, I mean, he doesn't have a whole lot of personal expenditures. I mean, look at him. But even if he were to be banned off of Twitch or YouTube today, there's 10 other platforms he can go to, and he wouldn't have as big of an audience, but he would still have a revenue stream. So I think people are starting to realize in this space that cancel culture, that this is a boogeyman. It always has been, but that no one can really be canceled. I think, we've probably had this conversation, in our social circles before, but like cancellation, it's not really real, and it's just betraying the expectations of the audience that you've accumulated that can get you deplatformed, or basically just like lose your audience. Like that's what real cancellation is. I think of people like Jenna Marbles, people who have seen what their communities have become. iDubbbz comes to mind, where he did lose a portion of his audience, but the core audience that was there for, him as a creator, they stuck around. But it did certainly have an impact on like his presence online, even though he's doing pretty well these days, what with this charity work and whatnot. But yeah, cancellation as a boogeyman and as a driver of clicks. You post a thumbnail with oh, what happened? And, I was canceled. And that's going to immediately draw people to your video. They want to see, oh, what happened to you? My king, what happened? There's like a consequence-free environment. I look at someone like Andrew Tate, who going to jail for a couple months is certainly a penalty, but he was one of the first people, I think, to vocalize, like, you can't do anything to me. I'm on platforms that don't matter. You can take me off of YouTube, but I'll still have, like, you know, a cadre of people that are following me because they are attracted to this content. They will go to where I'm at. Until he's actually, you know, his assets are seized or he's in jail for his many crimes, cancellation is, you know, a fairy dust for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Kanye West is another great example of, I will literally say the worst, most vile things that I can and still maintain an army of people that are going to cheerlead me and continue to say that I'm the greatest person in the world. So it's like, I really think that there's a certain level of influence that you garner that does make you untouchable from criticisms of the public. And I think that cancel culture, as you said, is a boogeyman that's utilized to justify why people are in the right or the truth that they're saying, and how rotted we are as a society of, we're too overly sensitive about minor things that people say. Like, one of the best examples that I've always brought up when talking about the idea of cancel culture is Kevin Hart. I think this was like 2014 or 2016 when Kevin Hart had a joke had surfaced of Kevin saying that he would abuse his son if he was gay. And, oh, it was just a joke. I know I said that I'd beat the bricks off of him if he, you know, became somebody who's queer, but it was just a joke, and we should be allowed to say jokes as comedians. The reason why he was canceled, quote unquote, is because he got removed from, I think he was going to be an Oscar host. And then Ellen, of all people, came to speak on behalf of the gays, saying it was just a joke, so it's okay. But like, he pretended like he was canceled. And I remember for years after that, he would bring that up and say how this is an issue with society. As this guy is getting movie deals left and right, he is living in the McMansion, he has all of the money in the world. Like, this is not ruining people by holding them accountable for things that they say. And I think the real thing that people are trying to do is say, hey, if you're at a level of influence, you need to have the emotional intelligence to not just shit on communities or punch down just because you think it's an easy laugh that you can get from people. And I think that, like, growing a social conscious, well, yeah, I think sometimes it can go too far. We've seen the Twitter posters who will criticize people no matter what it is that they say. Like, I can tell a right winger, sure, there are people that are too sensitive out there. That doesn't mean that criticizing people in positions of power because they're punching down is a wrong thing or it's causing some sort of social problem. The cancel culture at the end of the day is something that people who are in very wealthy positions are feeling threatened that they can't say whatever the fuck they want anymore.
Right. And it also just reinforced this idea that the communities that are attracted or brought to those content spaces, be they, you know, Fox News, Daily Wire, TPUSA, whatever it is, that there's a constant threat from the other, that they're trying to take away your traditions, they're trying to change your culture, they're trying to, you know, do anti-white racism, whatever it is. There's a corrupting force that's always attacking, and you have to, like, be a dedicated foot soldier. I can't remember who it was, but there was some, like, Israeli spokesperson at giving a college lecture, and her words were, those of us in Israel have to fight the war on its front lines, but those of you in America have to fight the war of words. And I let that marinate for a little bit because it reminded me so much of how the perceived loss of privileges on the right is a constant narrative. You know, we can't say, you know, ableist slurs anymore. Now we can't say these derogatory terms. Now I have to use pronouns. Now I have to do this. Minor adjustments to your vernacular or, you know, how you interact with people in the public, just through, like, common courtesies. Those are, you know, brought up as these massive battles at the forefront of the culture war that drive a lot of this content. I'm being canceled is definitely one of them, but, like, in that cancellation, I think there is an older term, like wokeism is just a downstream term of, you know, like cultural Marxism or CRT or, you know, in its oldest forms, Judeo-Bolshevism. The woke mind virus is, again, like a downstream version of Jewish hypnotism. All of these things that, you know, the right likes to propagate come from, like, ancient bigotries, you know, especially ones that were very popular with the rise of fascism in the early 1900s. And to the topic of the conversation, that it has devolved into either, 3-letter acronyms or incredibly dumb the terms like we're gonna just co-opt the term woke or political correctness. We're gonna co-opt those terms and bastardize what their original intent was, because it's easier to drive all of these things that we don't like, all of these things that are vectors for hate, into one simple term that you can apply everything that you don't like into. Christopher Rufo of the Manhattan Institute, who was the guy behind the CRT panic, quite literally said this in an interview. He's like, we wanted something that can be everything you don't like. You don't like miscegenation? CRT. You don't like, depicting the Civil War as, anti-slavery, that it was trying to end slavery. Well, that's CRT as well. Whatever it is. That kind of enshittification of discourse. Oh. Sorry, my dogs are going crazy.
No, you're good. You're good.
That kind of enshittification of discourse, I think, does show that the intellectual dark web of the first Trump administration, like, that's done. I don't think I see even any kind of like intellectualizing on like Fox News as if it ever was there, but all they do is just push more racism. They just reduce things down to the lowest common denominator, which actually, the vectors of hate actually brings me to another point I wanted to talk about. There are personalities on the progressive left. Someone like Hassan Piker, Taylor Lorenz. There are plenty of queer activists that have been the ire of the slop tube. We'll call them the GESLOPO, right? They basically drive clicks through their constant maligning of these figures to their own platforms because they are, a consistent, they're a consistent box to check. Is this person a woman? Is this person Arab? Is this person Jewish? Is this person queer? Is this person, Muslim? I find that someone like Frogan or, again, Taylor Lorenz, Hassan Piker, like, they're all a mix of those things. Taylor Lorenz is very big about masking and, immunocompromised people being protected through, like, common health practices. There's always going to be a coordinated effort in these spaces to try and drive hate towards them. I saw in my early, political development, Bill O'Reilly direct a lot of ire towards George Tiller, Dr. George Tiller, what he called Tiller the baby killer. He was a doctor that provided reproductive health care and an abortion clinic that ended up getting bombed. And I don't know if a lot of the new people in right-wing media, who may not even describe themselves as right-wing media, people like Asmongold, people like Ethan Klein, I don't know if they realize that the downstream effect of constantly laying into progressive advocates is that there's a real possibility that someone can act upon that hate and that they can, do real violence. They could end up in a manifesto of somebody. Tim Pool was in the manifesto of a shooter. I don't know if they realize that they can be those people. I know that the kind of intellectual dark web and legacy media figures are aware of that because they have been referenced multiple times. Candace Owens, Ben Shapiro, Charlie Kirk, all of these people, they've been mentioned. And I don't know if those who try to don some aesthetics of centrism or apolitical perspectives really recognize that giving any kind of wiggle room to the right, that, oh, maybe they have some good ideas. Maybe we need to, open up the door for right-wing perspectives. I don't know if they recognize that you give fascism an inch and it will take more than a mile.
Yeah, I think the centrist figures that you're talking about are always going to be groomed into right-wing spaces. I mean, look at Jordan Peterson. This is a guy for most of his life was considered to be a center-left person. And just because he was not willing to treat trans people with respect, he started to become this champion and superhero for the right. I remember from 2016 to like 2019, he was very adamant of saying, I'm not a right winger everywhere he would go.
Yeah.
And even when he would give these speeches to his super fans, I remember even issues like abortion. He was always like, we need to make sure that we're protecting people's right to bodily autonomy. You could say abortion's bad, but we allow bad things in our society. I would remember watching those videos as somebody who was growing up. And like that era, I was like 16, 17. So I was just becoming politically aware.
Yeah.
And I remember watching Jordan Peterson videos just because he was one of the most prominent political figures at the time. And it's just so crazy to see his degradation of people criticizing him being completely cheerleaded by the right because they know that a quote unquote centrist figure like him can do good when bringing people over into their camp, and just completely giving him everything that he wants.
Yeah.
Same thing with Tim Pool. I think it's people always say the left is too pure or too focused on making sure that everybody is principled. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's good to believe in your ideas and say, hey, if somebody is failing where they said that they genuinely care about something, we're going to call it out and we're going to criticize it. That's not trying to destroy bridges. That's trying to hold people accountable because we actually have values that we believe in. We're not the right of changing anything that we need to in order to gain power. We're going to remain consistent in what it is that we think needs reform. I think like the biggest thing with that is like the anti-vax narrative that's been completely bought up by the right. I mean, I don't remember any Republican being anti-vax when I was growing up. And once they saw that this was something important to their base, it's something that they really latched onto. And for a political movement that's always been so pro big pharma, it was interesting to see them completely throw them under the bus just for political points.
Well, these are complicated issues. We're not going to figure it out in one day.
Exactly. But yeah, I think these vectors of hate really is like speaking to tribalism at the end of the day. Humans have an instinct of building connections with people that they see similar to them. And that's always going to happen, regardless of what the political system is. And I think there's great forms of tribalism, like people realizing that we're in the same class or that we're being oppressed by the same groups of people. That is essential to build political movements. But the right uses tribalism to try to fragment the working class people as much as possible. And it's another avenue of capitalism trying to scapegoat marginalized groups. It continues to switch out the exact same rhetoric they're using on trans people in today's political climate they used on gay people 15 years ago. And even before that, they used on interracial couples. So the ever-evolving treadmill of targeted groups is never going to stop. And there's going to be a point where trans people are not stigmatized. Right. And even those that are right-wing and even those that are reactionary, I mean, maybe one day we're going to have, I don't have a lot of hope right now, but you always got to have some optimism that we will get a working class party in the United States, and liberals show themselves to be reactionaries that they are. They might be pro-trans rights, but they're still going to be using a scapegoat for another marginalized group. And it's important people to recognize that and see, if you're not trying to eliminate hierarchy and you're not trying to make as egalitarian power structure as you can, you're always going to get targeted groups that become the scapegoat of life's problems.
There is a certain like preying on the alienated, isolated nature of right-wing audiences that appeals to that tribalism that you're talking about, that desire for not just community, but for validation. Like all humans crave to be validated and be told, yeah, you're not crazy for feeling a certain type of way. You know, you're confused. You're not, you know, you don't have any kind of like future employment prospects. You feel like the world is, you know, going crazy, but you don't have the vocabulary to like describe what that is. And right-wing spaces prey on that. They offer not actualization, not any kind of material change to their lives, but a daily quest to, you know, go and harass somebody in a community that you've been told is your enemy, that you can get a little bit of validation and some dopamine by, you know, calling someone a slur in a live stream chat. You're getting banned in a chat. Like, that's your daily quest. Go say something and get banned. And there's no like reinforcement of any kind of like solidarity. There's no building a community. And I think that comes from a very like black-pilled nihilism that's developed in these spaces where they don't feel like things can get better. But if we can make the lives or existence of people that we've kind of been reinforced to think are worse than us, are not as good, not as, you know, not as virtuous, right? That if you can make them have a worse off condition, even if yours aren't improved, well, you're still better than that group. It's the LBJ quoted something like, if you can make the poorest white man feel like he's better than the poorest black man, then he'll empty his pockets for you, right?
Yeah, it's literally the same mentality when looking at issues like student loan debt forgiveness, right, and people saying, I had to pay for my loans. What do you mean we're going to help people actually get a footing in the economy? That's terrible. Or the same issue with like people, I always equate it to like, if we do get a cure to cancer one day, are we going to have chemotherapy patients be like, what, you're not going to have to go through chemo like I did? This is unfair. This is totally unjust. And like eliminating unjust systems are always going to seem bad for people who went through hard things because it's reinforced by certain political movements, right? And that's what the right wing completely tries to do, is say, hey, your life has been bad. Why the hell are we helping immigrants survive? Why the hell is New York giving a place of refuge or shelter to people who came from ravaged countries when we have veterans dying on the street? Not that we actually want to do anything for veterans, but how can you see this aid to other people when it's not happening to white American citizens? Like that, the whole thing of continuing to allow people's material conditions to deteriorate as long as they are marginally better than a worse group.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There is always there's always this line I hear from the right that they're coming after your jobs, they're coming after, your kids, they're trying to change the country, but there is a desire for change in the right. We're going to make America great again. We're going to, make sure that you have a better job, that, our economy's growing. Like, they desire something different, which is why in both 2016 and in 2024, there was a shift from neoliberalism to, in 2016, it was, we don't know what Donald Trump's going to do. There was kind of a mystery to him, right? Those who were listening to his words, those who, could understand, beyond the dog whistles, what he was saying outside of, the acceptable discourse and those permission structures, they could see what it was, but there was still kind of a gamble that people were taking. 2024, there was just a outright rejection of incumbency and a rejection of neoliberalism. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, they represented those things that were not getting better. Gramsci wrote about this in the rise of Italian fascism, that there was an inability for these old structures to justify themselves anymore. And in the absence of anything that was allowed to replace it outside of like old paradigms like feudalism or, the Enlightenment era liberalism, outside of any kind of permitted alternative to those, which would have been some kind of burgeoning socialist communist movement, a feeling that didn't allow itself to be articulated, which is the ennui, it's the class anxieties. It found something that would prey on those anxieties and give them a soothing narrative that it is the immigrant, it is the other, it is, the Jew, it's the Roma, it's the socialists and communists, because they want something that you don't know and understand what that is. You've been disincentivized from that. It's the same thing in these right-wing spaces. I look at a space like Twitch, which has, for a period of time, been kind of a safe hold, or not a safe hold, but a stronghold for progressive commentary. For a period of time, like, I don't know how long you've been on Twitch, but when I started streaming, it was in like late 2020, early 2021, and the only way that you could get a foothold in the space as a political streamer was to do the debate circuits. There was like a weekly debate that, you could ask to be on, and if, you had enough traction on your channel, then they would let you on, and you just got thrown into an environment of 9 people on a Discord call, and all of the conservatives, the right wings, the libertarians would just say the most insane shit, and there'd be like one leftist and one liberal there. And the leftists would be forced to agree with the liberal while all the right-wingers were saying insane shit. But once that environment, once that weekly thing went away, the right-wingers had nothing. They had no environment that attracted people to it. There was no spectacle outside of their normal output. And all of the progressives and leftists started still gaining traction because there was something they were doing, right? Which leads me to the topic of, they don't have any content. They constantly rely on manufacturing discourse, whether it's, infighting with each other when there's a brief period of silence. They'll manufacture outrage between each other, or they'll seek out someone who doesn't have a big platform, doesn't have a large audience, or is already in a marginalized community, and they'll be like, that's who we're going to go after. Whether it's...
Yeah. I think Shia, like Libs of TikTok, is like the perfect example of that, right? Is I don't have anything substantive to say, so instead I'm going to stalk 13, 14-year-old queer people on TikTok, find two things that don't make a whole lot of sense logically, and then attribute this to the entire left movement, whether it's liberal or progressive.
Yeah.
And I think that that's just, it's so evident that if you don't have a political project that you can promise to people besides just you're getting fucked and this is the people that are fucking you, like, to your point earlier, the right is searching for who is causing them material harm, right? Right wingers, regardless of what they believe, most of them are going to be part of the 99%. They're going to be people who are struggling to make ends meet and provide for their family. So they understand that things are not as guaranteed to them as they were 20, 30, 40 years ago. And the reason why, obviously, we know is because there continues to be a wealth gap of wealth transferring up to people who already have a majority influence. But for them, when they are consuming Tucker Carlson or they're consuming Steven Crowder or they're watching Libs of TikTok, it's because of the moral degradation of society. It's because of all these LGBTQ people who don't want to make sure that they're having nuclear families and therefore are creating a worse economic output. Again, it doesn't make any sense. But on the surface level, when I'm spending 12 hours a day to try to provide for my family, whether it's double shifts or 2 jobs, I don't have time to actually look into what is screwing me. And it's really easy if I see something that I've never seen before, like somebody who's masculine who is wearing a dress, that freaks me the hell out as a Midwestern person who's never had any experience with queer people. Right. This must be it. This must be what's changed now. This is crazy. Or I'm seeing more people of color that might not have as fluent of my home language as me. It must be because of them and this influx of people who are mooching off the system. I mean, that's what Ben Shapiro's saying, so it must be true. He talks fast.
Yeah,
so
he talks
it's like
fast and confident.
Yeah. So it is really evident to see, and I think that continuing to allow these people in these spaces is only fueling that fire, which is why I think that we need to be able to combat them, right? Like the whole reason why Trump got elected wasn't because Trump offered brand new ideas that had never been heard of the Republican Party.
Yep.
It's because Trump was confident enough to say, I know all of the answers. This is who's fucking you, and I will fix it all.
Yeah.
It's classic authoritarian rhetoric.
Exactly. He wasn't a different Republican in his policy approaches. He didn't corrupt the base of the Republican Party or those in the Tea Party wing of the Republican Party. He just made them feel comfortable being openly what the Republican project has always been.
Yeah, I think especially looking at his first term, I remember I talked to a lot of liberals who were like, I can't believe we literally had Hitler for a first term. And I think in his rhetoric, sure, it was a lot more reactionary and it was a lot more right wing. But in his policy and his administration, what was the legislation that he passed? The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017.
Well, you got the Supreme Court.
Yeah, but that was a matter of circumstance, right?
Circumstance,
no matter whatever the Republican was, they were going to anoint those same. I mean, not the same 3 judges, but they were still going to get 3 picks in just because of what had happened.
Yeah. I
mean, they were going to block Merrick Garland. We were going to get RBG and who's the other one that died? Brennan. I think Brennan and RBG both died.
Yeah, they got Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, and I forget the third one. Supreme Court justice is who they got.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, Trump's policy at the end of the day would have been like if we had a Joe Manchin presidency. He
Pretty
remained
much.
Obamacare. He didn't remove it. He didn't try to take away queer rights. And I mean, he would ban trans people from the military, which obviously is abhorrent. But if Mitt Romney had won instead of Barack Obama, I don't know if we would have had a Supreme Court ruling that gay marriage is completely fine across the country. And I think that that's important to see is the Trump administration in the first term was all about him tweeting and allowing neoconservatives to take over his administration. Mm-hmm. Where now this has been a very rightward shift and even moving away from capitalism. And that goes into what we were talking about earlier of even right wingers recognizing that capitalism is not in their favor. But instead of going a route of let's consolidate as the working class, it's really moved into a direction of right-wing populism, which doesn't exist. It's just fascist reactionary at the end of the day.
Yeah,
exactly. It's Tucker Carlson saying, oh, capitalism is something that should be questioned. How dare we allow these people like Jeff Bezos to continue to profit? When what is their solution to that? Really nothing. It's just continue to elect strong-arm Republicans who are going to stick it to Jeff Bezos by saying, hey, you need to be less woke. And Jeff and Mark Zuckerberg going on Joe Rogan saying, hell yeah, we're less woke now. We're super masculine. Fucking love us now. It just shows that capitalism will always evolve to meet whatever the current power structure is.
Yeah, it's a recognition of the budget shortfalls built within the existence of working class people, that there's a boom bust cycle, but it's not a rejection of like the class dynamic, it's a rejection of terms. It's not capitalism that's the problem, it's corporatism. Let's not look into the root of that word and who was like the one to popularize that, you know? But rather, what if we do more of a, you know, there's not so many things bad with the socialist idea of like, you know, you getting what's owed to you, but what if we tie like a nationalist ideology to that, a national socialism? Like, it's very easy to like find yourself in these perspectives, just like it is with you know, like anti-Semitism these days, what with, you know, all of the actions to protect Israel. Like, it's understandable that someone who is working a 9-to-5 and, you know, is barely able to make their rent, and they're just tangentially aware of politics and they see what's going on. They never had an education on like what this dynamic is. I don't think I was ever taught about Israel in high school, or like the Nakba, or, you know, that region at all. So it's very easy for someone with an American public education to go, well, like, it seems that we're doing a lot to protect this group, and I don't know anything about these ideologies or the history, so yeah, it seems like all of the things that have been reinforced in my life from my racist uncle, like maybe my racist uncle was right the whole time. It's so easy to fall into them.
It's bipartisan.
Yeah.
98% of Congress agrees that this is what we should be doing. Like, obviously, it's in our interests.
Yeah.
Why would I be against it? Yeah.
And I think one of like the more frustrating parts of like this very soothing narrative is that it's just complaining. It's just constantly complaining. And I complain all the time, but I'm complaining about the erosion of like social services, that we don't have high-speed rail, like this, that the economy is not, you know, constructed to make people's lives any richer, or to like enrich the actual, like, you know, discourse within the public, or like what exactly, you know, our cultural outputs are. Like, that's what I am like constantly frustrated with, you know, that, you know, people aren't getting anything, but they're complaining about like, you know, booba in video game is not big enough. And that's because, you know, white genocide is happening online and also in your life. It's very, very cringe.
And that even like goes to like the libertarian aspects of conservatism that I think has existed since, I mean, Reagan's the one who kind of spearheaded a lot of this, but even with the Tea Party, it's just been so much more inflamed. But it's people, or not people, Republicans and even some Democrats with social services. Our goal is going to be gut those social services so they don't have proper funding. They're going to fail inevitably because they don't have the infrastructure and resources to maintain them. And then we can point at them and say, see how stupid it is that we're propping up a system like this that doesn't work? We should get rid of it entirely.
Yeah.
This is the failure of government, even though it was the gutting of those programs that actually made them fail.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's so interesting hearing libertarians. My most recent Jubilee debate was pro-Elon versus anti-Elon.
Oh,
it was
God.
just a bunch of libertarian cheerleaders. But their whole premise of why Doge is so amazing and Elon is this innovator is because government is inherently moral. There's a reason why when you go to the DMV, it sucks. It's because government is just inefficient and it can't do anything. And the people that are in positions of power in the government are all greedy. They're using lobbyists to profit themselves. They don't care about the American people. And my retort to that was, yes, I'm not disagreeing with you there. But is the solution to greedy, profit-driven politicians to just completely remove government and an apparatus that is held accountable by people? Or is it to reform government so it actually does work as a stronghold against corporate interests?
Yeah.
If you're saying people driven by profit is the problem here, why the hell do you want to cede all of the power to people that are seeking profit? Because
Exactly.
if you don't have a government, baby, you're going to get corporations that come in and fill that power vacuum that you think is so amazing. If you're an Elon Musk dick rider, you really want Elon to not only be influencing the government, you want him to be the government. It's just such a ludicrous idea.
I mean, I've explained it to people, like, if you have if you have an old car and you have taken care of it, you've, you're always, like watching the miles, checking the oil. You're making sure that it's getting like, premium fuel in there. You're always checking the tires, rotating it, whatever it is. I'm not a car guy. Those are the basic things I know. And
Yeah.
if you're maintaining
Blinker
it,
fluid. Yeah.
like if you're maintaining it, if you're like keeping up with it, that car will last you as long as you treat it well. It's the same with these institutions. And people are frustrated because they're not changing the oil. They're driving it like it's like they stole it, which quite literally, I mean, there are people in, these institutions that are driving it like they stole it. We're watching the results of that on Twitter right now. And yeah, like, of course these things don't work. And to go to what you were saying about like complaining about these things and making the situation for them to complain about, it's the same thing in these online spaces where they're complaining about wokeness and they're complaining that, oh, well, leftists never get, punishment for TOS. And then they step over that line on purpose. And when there is a reaction to it, they feed off of that. It reinforces that narrative of, oh, see, they're coming after me. They're trying to cancel me. And eventually it leads to a ban, and it's cancel culture is real. See, the woke mob is after us, right? They don't want you to know the truth. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy of just complaining about nothing. They have no real cause behind, what they're pushing. As far as the independent, big fat air quotes here, independent, right-wing agitators online. As far as people in government, there is a strict purpose, and it's what you described. It's trying to erode these social safety nets and, remove power from the public, kick people off voting rolls. But what it is in these online spaces, I think, is trying to, like, create a sense within their audience that they are part of something. But if you were to say that, okay, you are part of a exploited class, you are, you can't afford your rent, not because your landlord has no like oversight over like, renting out properties or any kind of taxation, but because your landlord is an immigrant, your landlord is a trans. Like, that's how they reinforce these narratives. And I find that they are, there's always this projection of, oh, these are soy. Oh, they're, all these, right-wing commentators always say these progressives are gay, and oh man, everything's just becoming so soy. I've never seen a group of people more soy in my life than these, like, never going outside, like constantly. I don't think they've tasted water since, they were in middle school. Like, I don't know if it is because it's a mirror to some people in their audiences, and because of that nihilism and that black pilling that we were talking about, that there's kind of a watching someone destroy themselves. I don't know if there's kind of a sick fascination. There's a term online called sui fuel. And I know that there are some in the audiences, because there's been a phenomenon online for a while, where they watch these people that are clearly spiraling out of control, and they want to see how far they can push that person until they either end up on the news, walk into a school, whatever it is, or, you just never see them online again, and there's a news report from their area about someone being found in their home. Like, there is a certain aspect to that, and I certainly know that a lot of these online people don't recognize that they're either feeding into someone's eventual demise or they want to feed into that. I don't know. And I think this is a problem of a lack of actual care from the platforms to try and have some oversight on what is there. And I'm not saying there needs to be like a lot of censorship. I just know that when there is clearly someone who is out of control, like, there needs to be some kind of, intervention from the platform to be like, hey, this person clearly needs like a break or something.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Joshua Block?
I don't think so.
So this isn't really political, but it speaks to the exact thing that you're talking about. Joshua Block is a neurodivergent TikTok creator, very famous. He went famous for going to Times Square and singing the Empire State of Mind really loud, really off pitch.
Okay.
And that kind of just went viral. And now he's become really just a self-destructive alcoholic that's fueled on by his audience.
So
this is somebody, this is somebody with very few social awareness, very few, he's not able to really see what he's doing, but his audience is encouraging him and donating and saying, go get another drink. And it's gotten to the point where he is just dependent on alcohol to function without withdrawals.
That's awful.
So it's kind of like what you're saying, where TikTok is pumping this because it's getting clicks and it's getting likes, and he's on the algorithm because all these people are engaging with it, and it's live streaming the deterioration of a clearly messed up individual who needs actual help. And he's seeing it as success, and people around him and influencers are taking advantage of him because he's successful. I mean, he has tens of millions of followers now, and people are seeing this as an opportunity of, oh, hell yeah, let me collaborate with the weird kid that I can put on my platform so I get the clicks from him. It's really disgusting to see. And like that transitioning to a political conversation is like, hate really isn't just ignorance. Hate really is an ability to control people. It is racism, misogyny, transphobia, xenophobia. These aren't like bugs of the system or just people needing more education. They're features of a system that is designed to keep people divided and designed to keep them distracted from the people that are actually messing up their lives.
Yeah.
And I think that the only way that you combat this alienation and people feeling like they need to go on social media for any connection is you have to build genuine community in people's communities. And that really can't happen if your whole priority is, I need to go to work and provide economically so I'm not on the street. And then in my short free time, I'm just going to bed rot and go on social media so I can catch up with what's going on in other pockets of the world.
Yeah, there's a pretty consistent reinforcement of a negative incentive structure where you'll sometimes watch it happen in the moment if you like happen to find yourself in one of those like right-wing live streams where you'll see the streamer or content creator start to, push towards that line and wait to see what the reaction from their audience looks like. Waits to see like if the line is acceptable for the audience, if what they're saying is being reinforced by the audience. And sometimes we find ourselves like seeing this as well. Our chats can like kind of juice us up a little bit, and you'll see like a bunch of yups or KEKWs, two based going through your chat, and you're like, okay, well clearly, I must be saying something that people are agreeing with. And whether the initiation of that reinforcement was out of curiosity to see how far you could take something, or you were just a stream of consciousness, there is that negative reinforcement happening. And like you're saying, yeah, there's no incentive for building true community, which kind of leads me to the final question, I suppose. In spaces like ours, on progressive platforms, or in platforms with a progressive peer group like Twitch, we do value our independence as content creators. We want to be able to like make what we want to make and not have anyone lord over it. And sometimes progressivism can be a little bit preachy, and you feel like the checking each other is kind of tone policing or optics scolding. But I don't think building islands that seclude each other away from what we're doing, I don't think that grows our audience. I don't think that helps the people who are like on the come up, because tomorrow somebody could decide to go live and they're going to be the next Denims, Hasanabi, whoever it is. That could be the next person. And the more we reach out to each other, the more that we pump each other up and try and build communities around fundraising and getting people registered to vote, whatever it is, unionizing efforts. I think the more that we try and build those connections and keep it open, keep it accessible to people, but having very clear limits on, who can walk in that door. And, we say, all right, you can walk in, there's no shoes allowed. How often is it acceptable for like new people to go and put their dirty shoes up on the couch? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, at a certain point, there has to be limits. But I don't know how we can fight back against the right-wing growth strictly through, reacting to their stuff and like dismantling their arguments. I don't know how effective that can be because they're farming off of that.
Yeah, I think that there has to be a point, right, where you recognize that you need to build coalitions to accumulate power. Mm-hmm. You're not going to be able to have any meaningful change just sitting on the sidelines. And at the same time, you can draw lines in the sand of what is acceptable behavior, right? So like I've watched your streams, I've watched other people on the left streams, and I've disagreed with takes, but I don't think that disagreement necessarily means that we can't build coalitions. We can't be able to see a broader vision actually proliferate. But I do think that you need to be able to say, yeah, if you're going to be transphobic, like that's not something that we're going to allow in this community. And I think the easiest way to describe it is looking at things from a societal or a collective lens or structural lens versus failures of an individual, right? So for me, I know many conservatives, I know many Trump supporters. I think them emboldening an administration like that leads to not only real world harm, but it continues to erase what is important or principled. So if you're going to support someone like Donald Trump, you're going to lead to international harm and you're going to lead to domestic harm.
Right.
If you are cheerleading Kamala Harris without proper criticisms, you are going to lead to international and domestic harm. At the same time, I recognize that I have charity and I have the benefit of the doubt for those individuals, like we were talking about earlier, who might not have time to actually research what's going on. They might be in echo chambers where their whole family supports Donald Trump and the friends around them supports Donald Trump. Like it's easy to see how people can come to conclusions without critical thought. But we have strong adversarial lines for people that are propagating this information, pundits, politicians. I think that the left already knows that to do that. I mean, progressives are pretty quick to say when we don't like someone, regardless of what political party they are. But I think letting people know that off the bat is also really important to coalition build, because I've gotten Republicans who've come from Jubilees, like in my Twitch stream before, who have said, hey, I just want to let you know I don't agree with you on everything, but I appreciate the way that you're coming at things from a calm demeanor. And I'm always curious. I'm like, which video did they watch?
Right.
Because if they watched Michael Knowles, I was not a calm demeanor.
Yeah, because if there's like one thing, that's usually how it is too. It's not like it's an accumulation of one things, but there's like that moment of the light bulb clicks on finally, like the final connection is made where they're like, huh, okay, well, like there's something to that, right? I try so hard to like have that patience and charity, and like I get a lot of like feedback from my community being like, you're way too patient with people, like you have a lot of charitability, but you know, at a certain point, like you just gotta like, okay, now you're sucking the oxygen out of the room, which is what I find a lot of it is. But yeah, I do think that the charitability is the most accessible way. One of the things that you often hear from the right is like, oh, like you say one thing and like, you know, you're immediately kicked out of spaces. What was that one thing? It's like I don't know, you're calling someone a slur. And it's like, well, that one thing's pretty big.
Yeah, I think that it's really important to play to people's strengths, right? So there are some people that just do not have the bandwidth to engage with right-wingers ever. And I think that's fine. I think that we need people that can build comfortable left spaces where people can come in and just enjoy being in community with people who aren't going to harass them. That's great. That's fantastic. You have people that come at debate from a place of trying to educate or trying to instill certain ideas in people that have never been exposed to those ideas. I think that's fine, as long as you're not going into it of, I enjoy debate for the purpose of debate, but instead you go in with a mission of, hey, I want to get these 3 ideas across to an audience that this person has that could plant those seeds for them to change in the future. So I think that people have different strengths. I mean, Hassan has said all the time, like, I hate debating. You know, I don't consider myself a debater. That's great. Don't debate. I think that if you provide commentary and news analysis for people, that's fantastic, and people need that. So it's really all about strengths. I've heard people say that with Surrounded too. Like, there's so many fucking debate-brained people that come into those Surroundeds, and before we start shooting, they're like, oh, I can't believe some of these people are here, these average Joes. They're just ruining the left. I can't believe they're just going to go up there and like be a coward to the right-wingers. And for me, I'm like, I don't think everyone's coming at this with the purpose of like, I want to reach the white conservative and change their mind. I think people are coming here to be like, fuck you, you're a bully, I hate you. And I think that some people, especially like the biggest thing is for the Michael Knowles one, I'll speak on that. There were a couple of trans speakers who didn't go up there and make the most eloquent point on why transness needs to be justified. Because why the fuck do they need to debate their own existence? They went up there to say, hey, you're a piece of shit, fuck you. And I hate that you're actually here and I'm engaging with this. Yeah. And I know that there's a lot of trans people who are watching that like, fuck yeah, I don't feel like I can say that in my community because I might either be in danger or I might not be as assertive. And them seeing somebody be able to just stand as a provider, or not a provider, but a defender. Yeah, a gladiator. Like that is inspiring for people. And it gives people that reinforcement of, hey, I'm not the freak that society's trying to stigmatize me to be. I am somebody who deserves human value. I am somebody who deserves dignity. And I think that that's great. So I don't think everybody needs to come at things with the same motivations. And I still think that as the left, we can provide for the movement with different strengths of people. And it's just, we can't just infight for the sake of infighting. I think drawing lines and like ideological disputes is important, but I think that you can allow people to have their own strengths without like hating them. Like, I guess this will be the last point. I'm kind of rambling here, but I think people, not the last point for the whole thing, but on this issue, I think people view like commentators who are afraid to debate, and they'll say, oh my God, this person's a coward for not being able to challenge their ideas with right wingers. I think that's a stupid take. I'll see similar takes of, oh my gosh, people think they can debate the existence of LGBTQ people. I also think that that's a little misguided, because there are so many people who are going to watch that video who have never talked to a queer person in their life. And if they see somebody go up there and confidently say like, no, queer people are just the same. Queer people just want to live a life. They want to be able to have fun, and they want to be able to have positive experiences. And sometimes that really does plant the seed in people's minds of, holy shit. I got so many DMs from people saying like, hey, I just wanted to let you know, I've never seen like a cis person defend trans rights before, and you really just made it seem so stupid to be transphobic. And for me, I'm like, awesome. I'm glad that I planted that seed in people's minds. And two things can be true at the same time, I guess, is like the end statement.
Yeah, it's a diversity of tactics.
Yeah, totally.
Well, this was a great conversation. Is there anything you'd like to shout out right now before we cap it off?
Yeah, I think it's really important to build coalitions, and especially people who are like-minded and have similar ideologies. The only way that we win these movements is by coming together. I think it's really easy to be super doomer right now because of how fascistic and authoritarian the current administration is. But we are seeing wins. I think that people should be hopeful. I don't want to call the race and jinx it, but Zoran right now is having tremendous momentum. I think that there's a huge coalition building between them. I think reactionaries and authoritarian egoists are always going to fight amongst themselves, as we're seeing today on Twitter. Mm-hmm. People thought that the building and the bond of the richest man in the world and the most powerful man in the world is going to lead to right-wingers winning everything, and they imploded within 7 months. Like, that's an important win to see. These people don't know what they're doing. They're inefficient when it comes to leading. Every fascist empire and regime has failed, and they will continue to fail because people can see through the bullshit. Yes, so people need to have hope. And as far as coalition building, I do something a little bit lighter where we're just having fun with a lot of leftist streamers every month. So if you want to check out those secret Elon streams, come check it out at One Hand Politics.
You might have to change the name of that pretty soon, depending on how this goes.
Yeah, I know. I saw a tweet that was like, Elon's coming out as a communist tomorrow. That'd be so funny.
I know. All right. Well, Mason, thank you for doing this with me. I'm glad you took some time today. We went a little bit longer than I expected, but it's a wide conversation to have, just broadly, state of right-wing media. So I appreciate your time, dude.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I always love talking about these ideas, and I'd love to have a conversation again in the future.
Hell yeah. I'll let you know when we do that next time.